Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim McCarthy, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming on out to this episode of Chill with Jim live from Tulum, Mexico. That's right, everybody. I am in Mexico joining you for this Chill with Jim live session. So, at Chill with Jim, you guys know it. You're probably already thinking it. It's always business up top and pajamas on the bottom. So again, thanks everyone for coming on out and joining us today. I am your host. My name is Jim McCarthy, and I am the client advocate for Strix, Louisiana. And it is my job to make sure that our clients are set up with the best equipment, the best software, and the best IT solutions to make sure that their businesses are running at optimal efficiency. We typically always have David DeArmond with us as well, but he might join us in a little bit. David is the owner of Strix, and he has really encouraged this Chill with Jim episodes to help our clients learn a little bit more. So just some more information about Strix, Louisiana. We believe that there is always a better, simpler, more secure way to do just about everything in this world. What that means to us is that we are constantly searching and adapting our processes to make sure that we do indeed have the best solution in place. Now, we do believe that part of this responsibility is to help educate our clients as well as others out there on the current resources that are out in the market. We like to bring awareness to security risks, which is actually what we're going to do today. And then we just kind of like to bring everyone up to date on some things that are going on in the IT world today. And every now and then we have special guests as well as some productivity tips. So today we're actually going to be talking about something that a lot of you may already have heard about, kind of became famous when, oh, hold up a second. I got some people coming in here. I'm gonna come on and let in. All right. Hey guys, thanks for joining. I'm running the show. David might hop on in a bit. So I am running the show and didn't even see you guys in the waiting room. I apologize. So today we're going to be talking about supply chain attacks. Now, these are also known as a third party or a value chain attack. And what happens here is a malicious actor, so the bad guy, gains access to an organization's network by infiltrating either a business partner, a vendor, or possibly one of their suppliers. Now, all of those entities have access to the organization's data. So as soon as the business partner, vendor, or supplier is breached, they have access to your data along with a lot of other people's data. So these attacks usually result in significant damage to finances as well as to the reputation of those companies. Now, like we talked about earlier, you probably have heard this term before, and the term supply chain attack became much more familiar due to a massive Solarwinds breach that happened actually in December of last year. So these attacks have actually, this was one of the bigger attacks that we've seen, but the attacks themselves have actually been happening for many, many years. So supply chain attacks are not a new thing. For example, in 2013, a small little company by the name of Target suffered one of the largest breaches in retail history. What happened here was hackers accessed Target's customer payment information by infiltrating one of the company's HVAC suppliers. So the air conditioning guys, they actually breached the air conditioning company, the HVAC company, were able to get into their network. And since they were actively using some of Target's data, they got in really and did quite a bit of damage. They got in and stole the payment history from, I think it's estimated at 41 million Target customers. It resulted in about 20 lawsuits to Target, against Target, I'm sorry. And there's been, to date, there's been about $60 million spent in response and remediation to the breach. So, at Strix, we're looking at these trends. We're always constantly kind of evaluating what's going on. And, we believe that as the world continues to increase the reliance on remote work and digital commerce, as well as cloud usage, that these attacks are definitely going to increase. And you're going to be hearing and seeing a lot more supply chain attacks in the future. So just think about this, the number of vendors or third-party resources that a business or an individual is using these days, they're making that supply chain extremely complex. Most organizations have, 10, 20, 30 vendors, business partners, or suppliers they work with. And we're seeing, and not to mention all the services that they're using. And so we're seeing as that grows in complexity, so does the number of ways to, be infiltrated by the bad guys. So since each vendor stores data for multiple clients, once the supply chain attack has successfully been completed, it results in multiple businesses suffering from exposed sensitive data. A lot of times they'll go after sensitive data. They're going to go after intellectual property, credit cards, payments, anything the bad guy can then again sell. They're getting in, they're grabbing it. Now, if you think about just compromising one vendor, the attacker actually gets to access all of that vendor's information, clients, data, any data that's shared from the client to the vendor. All of that is game. Now, this is exactly what happened with the recent Solarwinds breach, which was one of the most devastating attacks we've seen so far. And I don't know if Brad's in a spot where you can unmute. I was going to have David help with this, but can you tell us a little bit more about what SolarWinds provides for their clients, so so our audience out there can understand the severity of this problem?
So yeah, the SolarWinds product was the Orion product. SolarWinds makes a wide range of products, but this particular one was that. It is a network management system. So basically you enter in data about network equipment, major infrastructure, and it's either monitoring it, maintaining it. So it has access to very critical infrastructure within an organization. Crown jewels, if you will.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so a lot of these companies, they're going to use a service like this, like SolarWinds, to help them manage your IT. At Strix, we use what's called an RMM, which is a remote management and monitoring system. And so it's similar where these systems are going to have access to hundreds, maybe thousands of individual devices based on that company. So the implications here are just massive. Here's kind of a deeper look into how the attack actually, how they found out about the attack, what went on. So December 8th of last year, FireEye actually announced that it had been hacked by a nation state. And then later on that week, December 13th, the news broke that the US Treasury Department had also been compromised. Now, they actually were able to verify that the groups that targeted FireEye were the same groups that targeted the US Treasury. And both of those companies were using Solarwinds, the Orion brand, as Brad had said. So with both of these breaches, what they found out was the group that was actually in charge of this was a group by the name of APT29, which is actually a collaboration between Cozy Bear and a Russian SVR. So go back in time a few weeks and you will see we actually did a amazing, spectacular chill with Jim on Fuzzy Bear, Cozy Bear, all of these different hacker groups. They all have strange names like that. So if you're curious about learning more, go ahead, check out our YouTube, and you can check and you can see the last episode about that. But as of today, remediation from that massive breach of SolarWinds has affected 18,000 organizations and has costed companies billions of dollars. And the really scary thing here is that there's businesses and actually government agencies that are still now just finding out that they were affected by the attack. And it's been over 2 months now. So just to think about how far reaching and difficult that attack is to detect. There it is right there. I mean, we've been in 2 months and they're still finding lots of people who have been affected by this. So, well, how exactly did the SolarWinds attack happen and how was it deployed? Well, so there's the malicious software that was put into place was actually deployed as part of an update from the company SolarWinds. It came from their own servers and was digitally signed by a valid digital certificate bearing the same name. So, if you think about that, everything looks, your computer, if anyone was to look from the outside, anybody observing, they're going to think that this is the SolarWinds product, and it's going to make it like it's not going to raise any flags. We're not going to see any suspicions here because everything shows that it's coming straight from our vendor. Now, they don't believe that the certificate itself was compromised in this case, but the malicious software was actually deployed through SolarWinds' own distribution channels. So, if you think about SolarWinds being affected, it going down to their clients then have clients, which may have clients. So this thing keeps just growing in size. What the bad guys did here is they actually took advantage of a delayed execution. Now, this is when the malware, the malicious software checks file system timestamps to ensure that the product has been deployed for 12 to 14 days before it does anything. And what that 12 to 14 day window, it makes it really difficult to detect. It also makes it difficult to sandbox that software or that instance. So sandboxing is like a totally you create a totally separate environment to test out software, test out resources that's not connected to anything, and so you can watch and see if that system is affected before you put it into place into your whole network. And with this 12 to 14 day waiting period, it makes it really hard to detect even in high security environments. Um, and so those are some of the things that some of the ways they're getting in. And actually, if anyone out there has any questions, feel free to just, or comments, feel free to pop in at any time because this is really good when we get some back and forth. So, all right. So Jim, you told us how bad it is. Now we're all scared. Um, we all understand what it is and a little bit more about how it happened. Well, what are some recommendations for those clients or people out there, businesses that are still using SolarWinds products? So here's the first thing. Number one rule is if you're using Solarwinds Orion, you go off of the basis of you assume you have already been compromised. It's the safest way to do it. Now, if you're using Solarwinds, but you're not on their Orion product specifically, still consider mapping all of your attack surfaces just in case that those resources were also compromised in this supply chain attack. You want to monitor for intrusions and log, 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 log. So logging is very, very important. And it's very important to actually invest in a company or maybe a person that can help you interpret these logs to make sure you're not missing anything when something bad happens. You really need to be, you can measure something all day long, but if you don't go back and look at your results, then it's not going to do you much good. So you want to log, 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 and look over those. Set up alerts for any events and investigate anything that's questionable. The Department of Homeland Security actually issued an emergency directive to help mitigate the compromise, and it outlines a lot of the required actions that you need to take to fix the problem. And if you're not a government entity, you don't have to do this, but it is definitely recommended if you're in the private sector or civilian sector that you go through these guidelines and see how you should, apply them to your business as well. You can download the recommendations, read through them, and then go ahead and take action to make sure that that mitigation is in the process. There's a few more things that you can do to help protect yourself along the way. Now, if you're not a SolarWinds customer, there's still plenty that you can do. First of all, you really want to determine who has access to the sensitive information. So while the digital transformation of all of these companies, it leads to growth, what it ends up doing also is it increases the attack surface. So the multiple ways that you can be attacked and the multiple devices you're using, the more you get digital with these, the more that they become active as a target. Many companies have yet to even identify, list, and map all the vendors, all the services they are using, and to evaluate how those vendors are using the data. So, we use a rule of like pretty much a need to know basis. So a lot of these companies are sharing information with vendors in a general way, like, oh, they need access to our network. Boop, 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 boop. All right, they have access and we're good. Instead of doing it, well, what exactly does this vendor need access to? Let's go ahead and build it out so that information, that data is separate, and that vendor, that entity only can access the data they need. A lot of companies they want to do it the easiest way, so they give them mostly full reign, and this ends up coming back to bite them in the end. And in order to kind of help you manage all of these digital footprints, all of these companies you're using, you can literally just start to draw out kind of like a map of who you're using, what they need, and what they're used for. I've actually found in most cases here, while we're doing this with a client, we'll also discover some services that maybe they're doubling up on, or maybe they have a company that handles two aspects of two different companies handle different aspects of what you need. But if you investigate a little bit more, you can get that down to one company supplying you for all of your needs. So along the way, you kind of find out and you can trim it down a little bit. There's almost always some cost savings there. So that's a great thing. Another thing you can do is you can identify the assets that you have in your network, in your infrastructure, that are most likely to be targeted. So just being able to understand what motivates the malicious bad guys out there, which assets are highly valuable, such as intellectual property or customer information. These are most likely going to be the attack sites, the attack vectors. That's the treasure that the pirates want. So they're going to come in and they're going to try to get it. And it is, just identifying these areas will help you put in the right security that will help you monitor and keep all of those assets safe. And so as we grow in complexity here, we're going to have to do a little more work just to make sure that all of those devices are covered. Another thing you can do is you conduct a third-party risk assessment. Now, this is one that's really good. So, us at Strix. So Strix is doing everything to the T. We have all of our security up to date, the best of the best of the best. And then one of our vendors that we're using for that security doesn't practice what they preach. Well, that vendor gets compromised, and all of a sudden Strix is in some big trouble because we're thinking that everything is golden and good because we're practicing the safe habits, but the vendor could be doing something totally different and putting our company at risk. So this is very important. You can do things like pen testing, on-site investigations, just to test the incident response of these companies, of the third parties. And actually, most of the time, just bringing up the conversation will help you discover whether they're doing a good job or not. Go ahead and use some of the compliance regulations that are already out there just to go ahead and touch base with them on. So you have NIST, NIST, you have the CMMC, and they also recommend the GDPR. Now, these are all fancy acronyms for just security structures that have been built that you can go back and look and make sure you're kind of hitting all of these check marks. You also want to apply that same access control that we talked about earlier to any insider or inside your company assets, people, anything like that, workers, employees. Because again, now if you're giving full access to a person in your company that doesn't need full access, then you're playing with fire. Because if that person makes a mistake, they don't just have a little bit of data, they have your entire company's data, and they can do a lot of damage within once they get in. So you also want to manage any shadow IT. Now, shadow IT is a recent shift to remote work, which has enabled for the shadow IT, which brings in personal devices into the equation. So you think about all these people working from home, these people are connected in multiple ways. They might have a work laptop that they're using as a resource. That work laptop is connected to a network that has their smart TV, their Echo, Amazon Dot. It has all of their other computers, cell phones, anything that can connect to the internet at their house is probably going to be on the same network. So as a company, it's very important to either come up with a way to separate that employee from the other devices, protect them while they're using that resource, or just to go ahead and really do a deep diagnostic into what resources they're using, what personal devices they are using, and to make sure that they're covered, that you have security in place to make sure those devices are taken care of as well. You want to identify any of the insider threats that you may have. So this might not always be an employee. This could be a business partner, another company that you share information with, even verbally. Insider threats can come in a lot of ways, but typically they're going to have some connection to your organization, either employed by or using them as a resource. So you want to include the security language in all of your contracts. So if you have a cybersecurity or an IT company, and you're getting ready to sign up for a new service. You're going to you're going to use a new vendor. You're going to found a new supplier where you can get all of your stuff for a little bit cheaper. It's important to run that contract by your cybersecurity, by your IT company, to make sure that they're covering all those cybersecurity bases. So a lot of the contracts these days, they are very legally sound, but they don't always remember to go and to put in the um, cybersecurity risks, the cybersecurity potentials for remediation. So it's very, very expensive to fix these problems if you have a contract with your vendors that stipulates very specifically what they're responsible for, the security practices and controls that they need to have in place to work with your company. It will cover your butt in the end because the liability will then be on your vendor instead of your company. And then you also just want to make sure that you're staying in contact with these vendors throughout your relationship. So you think about if you've had a company that you've used for 2 or 3 years, when was the last time you talked to them about their security practices? When was the last time that you even talked to them? Honestly, a lot of us, we get these companies and vendors in place and they're kind of a set it and forget it type thing. But it's very important to go back and to do some of these security reviews with them, to talk to them and make sure that they are just managing their cyber risk appropriately. And again, think about that list. So that supply chain of all those companies that you use and how far those go back, So just like the internet connection, if I'm using the internet connection, it actually goes through, let's say, Cox. Cox uses then another company to get that sells them internet, and that company actually uses a company from another country to supply them internet. So this keeps growing and growing and growing. So if they're able to access something at the top and trickle down to all of their clients, to all that data they have access to, that's where it gets just, it's really, really hard to bounce back from this. And, we were talking about reputation. So earlier, um, since the Solarwinds attack, I'm guessing that most companies are very, very afraid to do business with Solarwinds as a result. Uh, it creates a bad name. It creates a feeling of insecurity with your company's name. So even if it was SolarWinds that was the company that actually got breached and you are using their product, unfortunately, your name gets dragged through the dirt with them as well. And now they start to associate your company with security risks. So these are all very, very important things to keep in mind. And actually, I wanted to go ahead and open it up to all those out there in Facebook world or to anyone joining us today, if they had any further suggestions on ways that we can protect ourselves, either preventing or diagnosing, finding, discovering, anything like that, we would love to go ahead and hear from you.
Hey, Jen, this is Courtney Sparkman.
Hey, it's Courtney.
Hey, got a quick one for you.
Yes,
So,
sir.
in addition to pen testing, right? So we do pen testing here. What else should we be looking at? Is there other testing that we should be doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different types of tests you can do. And actually, Brad might be the expert in this area if he's available, because I know for his company, they have a very strict compliance out there. And we'll see if he hops on to give you any advice here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, thank you, Brad. I've been talking so much. I'm just trying to get others involved.
Yeah.
I don't have David here, so thank you so much.
So, yeah, I mean, pen testing is looking for, in most cases, for vulnerabilities, and can you exploit those vulnerabilities? So That's not necessarily what happened with Solarwinds. Now that did happen to Solarwinds, which is how the whole process started. But it's a very tricky, it's most small businesses, we'll just keep it in that context, is going to be very difficult when a nation state, which is what this was, goes after a small business. It's very, one, it's very unlikely, and two, it's very difficult because they basically have all the funds they need to accomplish something like this. And so SolarWinds was very sneaky, and they were very patient. This was a very long process. Most cyber criminals, which are going to go after small businesses, are in and out. They want the quick buck. They want the money. So nation states get a little more difficult. And so as far as how you test against them, it's really about having conversations with your providers and asking them the hard questions. And the easy one I usually go off of, just kind of, it goes across the board, are the CIS top 20 controls. And pen testing is number 20. So Courtney, doing that, you're doing something right.
Yes. Yeah. And actually, great mention there. Great, Brad. We actually did a chill with Jim 2 weeks ago, where we dove into those controls, those CIS controls, a little deeper. So if you would like some more information on that, you can go back in time and look at our YouTube channel. But they cover things. Penetration, like he said, was number 20. But there's also limiting control, like we talked about. Data recovery, how are you going to react if something does happen? Maintenance, monitoring, and analysis. So it just gives you a basic foundation of what to go off. And that's why we really like, Brad mentioned that in a previous chill. And we think it's great to use as a base because it gives you 20 things just kind of check off as you go. Oh, we're not really hitting that. Okay, let's come back and visit this one. And oh, we got this under control. But vulnerability patching is another one, Courtney, and you're with us, so the patching is taken care of. But the conversation is so important. You want to have a security questionnaire basically that you're going to run through with all of the people you bring in. So vendor, business partner, supplier, the guy who does your air conditioning. So you're going to want to go and look and to see if these people are hitting the same security standards that you are. And so that's a very important thing to do as well.
Yeah, and Courtney, I'm not 100% sure what industry you're in, but that kind of plays a role into it as well. If you are in a regulated industry, then obviously you want to start with what your regulations are and kind of go from there. If you're not in a regulated industry or loosely, the CIS top 20 are the easiest to kind of to go off of, because there are, if you ever hit where you are, a lot of there's cross maps between other standards. And so it's a good, just foundational thing to go off of.
Got it. So I'll go back and check out the video. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I'll actually I'll just go ahead and put it in. I pulled up the CIS controls here, so I'll go ahead and just drop that link in there for you, Courtney, in the chat. So that way, if you want to take a quick glance, and then always, of course, go back and support the Strix with the Chill with Jim Strix YouTube channel. That's great. So there you go. That's in there for all of our panelists. We'll give you a rundown of those 20 security checkoff list. And another thing on that is that for small businesses, these are 20 steps you can take that are not extremely expensive, depending on how you go. So it's a good foundation for small businesses, because what we found, and I think a lot of us can agree, is that being a small business is it's hard to pay for all of the security you need. It's very expensive to have a company watch your infrastructure, your network for 24 hours a day. Uh, so get some of these in place, keep it moving, and as you grow, then you get a little bit more strict, or you add in something extra here. Uh, but I think those 20 will give you a good footstep for what you need. And then yeah, just approach it. Ask everybody you know that's involved, and see what their stance is on it. A lot of times you'll be able just to tell from how the conversation starts in the, I don't know, first 5 minutes once you go down that checklist, and they're like, no, we don't do that. So take that's one way to do it, and as well as make sure and keep your employees up to date on all of this as well. So safe cyber hygiene, keeping their computers and using their computers and their devices in safe ways just eliminates a few more of those entry points for the bad guys to get in. Um, and so let me see here if anybody on Facebook wanted to add anything. And all right, not seeing it. So that's a lot of the information we wanted to give to you. If there's any other questions, Courtney, Brad, anything that you think is important to bring up, it's a great time to do it before we go ahead and close around out.
I think, and I said it in our response to Courtney, but I feel like one of the big things with this is it's a big news item because it probably will go down as one of the largest hacks we've seen. But the thing that I guess we all have to realize is that, especially small, medium-sized businesses, is that it's really easy to get distracted and start to focus on supply chain, which is important, but the everyday simple things that top 20 cover are going to take you so much further than worrying about supply chain attacks from a nation state, because you could spend tons of money and not get anywhere close. And this is proof. I mean, they got through the Department of Defense, they got through a bunch of other these companies. So there's no way a small business is going to even come close to protecting themselves for something like that. Whereas they can spend very little money and resources and go after the low-hanging fruit that so many don't pay attention to. And I think we easily get distracted because it's the shiny object. But I think we need to make sure we hit those basics.
Amen.
So essentially, stuff like that, what happened to Solarwinds, is the 2% of what happens when it comes down to cyber attacks. The other 98% are probably smaller things that, if you go through the CIS controls list, that you might be able to mitigate. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Very much so. Very much so.
Yes, sir. Yep. And so that's a great analogy there. And you can kind of think about it as, so the janitor has all the keys, right? So all the keys to all the doors in the building. And let's say the janitor works 18,000 different companies. Well, those keys that he had, someone stole them, and now they have access to everything. So SolarWinds was basically gave these companies, gave the bad guys a key to get into these systems, and then from there they did all of their damage. And yeah, it's a big picture type thing. So they're not going to come after, well, they most likely won't come after a small business, because right now what they can do is they can hit something really, really, really big like this and affect thousands and thousands of people.
Got it. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, I gave it my very hard to do, awkward 5 to 8 second pause to make sure I'm not missing any questions there. And so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Hope you guys were able to learn quite a bit. Hopefully we didn't scare you too much, but this is something, again, we like to bring a little more understanding. So SolarWinds has been in the news a lot. We wanted to shed a little more light on what it was, how and why it's such a big deal, and then go over some of those things we can do to protect all of ourselves. Next week, if you guys will join us, it will be a great one. We're actually having a special guest, and it's my Uncle Rob, who works at one of the hospitals, one of the larger hospitals in Texas, and he'll be covering cybersecurity. He'll be covering how they deploy and manage thousands and thousands of computers. He does the help desk there. He runs the help desk there for all of the workstations. So we'll be able to talk security. We'll go into some of those fun installs that they have. So if you could imagine having 10 to 20,000 computers out there on Windows 7 and having to upgrade every single one of those or replace every single one of those, you can imagine how big of a on-taking that is. So join us next week to get some more insider looks into just how healthcare, how hospitals and big organizations like that, how they approach this type of stuff. And it'll be the same chill time at the same chill network. And we appreciate you very much for coming out. Brad, thank you so much for participating. Courtney, thank you for the questions and the support as always. We really, really appreciate it. And we will see you guys next week. Adios from Mexico.